video is going to be my favorite fall eyeshadow palettes. I've been wanting to do more like palette focused videos for a while now, but for some reason I just didn't get around to it for a while. I mean, for some reason I don't really have time to film other videos besides get ready with me's before I either go to work or see my boyfriend. So usually I just end up filming get ready with me's, and then I film most of my like videos like this or favorites videos and like haul videos at night after work now, because I find I have much more time to do them then. But I kind of want to start doing like, you know, favorite palettes for every season, kind of tell you guys what palettes that I want to focus on and use more during the fall season, and then I'm going to start keeping on going with this type of series pretty much every year, like every 3 months. I would think I would be able to do this. I kind of got inspired not just by, because obviously everybody starts counting down their fall favorite fall eyeshadow palettes, but I kind of got inspired to do this from Mary Moods and Makeup. Of course, she just posted her favorite fall palettes. I haven't finished the video yet. I'm going to finish it very soon, but she is like the fall queen, and I know she has beautiful dark color stories to use for the fall time, so I have quite a few palettes to talk about. But I also got inspired by the season kind of focused usage of my palettes, and that way I would be able to focus on my palettes more so for every season. I feel like that's a little bit of an easier way to utilize my eyeshadow palettes more, rather than like doing like a shop my stash, because for me, I love using like all different palettes all the time. I don't really love using a certain palette unless I am testing it out and I've had received it for like a new palette that I recently had gotten. But the other person that inspired me to do like my favorite palettes for the season and palettes I focus on for every season is Allie Brienne. She usually does this type of video like every season. She says like what's in my fall roundup, what's in my winter roundup of palettes. So I kind of wanted to start doing that inspired by her as well. So let's go ahead and jump into my favorite fall palettes. Honestly, the first two that I'm going to talk about are pretty much staple palettes for me for this time of year every single year. So the first palette is the Urban Decay Naked Honey palette. This is not just my favorite fall palette for neutral tones. I love these like honey toned colors for fall time. I just think they're so beautiful for this time of year. I just love these warm toned honey vibes. They absolutely nailed this palette. It's just my favorite Urban Decay palette that they have ever done. Honestly, since this palette came out, I really haven't been inspired by any other Urban Decay palette that has come out. They just nailed this palette, and it's so funny because I wasn't originally going to pick up this palette, and then when I did, I was like, I'm in love, and I've used this palette so much. Even though when I first got it, I was overwhelmed by it because I had also gotten another palette that I'm about to talk about at around the same time. So I was utilizing both of those palettes around the same time. And they were both palettes I wasn't going to get. And then I picked this up and I was like, this is so beautiful. There's just something about this color story. I just love like these mustardy honey tones right here. Oh, so pretty. And then like these golden kind of tones and like this greeny honey color. Oh, they're so beautiful. And then you can go a little bit darker and smokier with like these deepening shades down here. It is just so beautiful on the eyes, and then every time I use it, I'm never disappointed with my look. I just think it always looks so beautiful for this time of year. I only really use it during the fall time. This palette just screams fall vibes to me. I don't really use it around any other time of the year. And it's just, oh, it's so beautiful. Some of the shades, especially Honey, can develop a little bit of hard pan, but that's not hard to get rid of. And plus, if you use a glitter glue, They stick really, really nicely to a glitter glue. But the shade Honey isn't going to swatch the best, but look at those tones. Like, there's something about this golden. Oh my god, it's just like one of the most beautiful golds I've ever used. But like, look how these reflect. Like, Urban Decay does not do shimmers like this anymore. I don't know what happened, but for some reason, these shimmers are beautiful, reflective, buttery, and the mattes in here are just as beautiful and blendable. I mean, I've always thought that Urban Decay's mattes were really nice. But some of their shimmers are, you know, not like the best, but like these shimmers are beautiful on the lid. So I absolutely love this palette. You guys have heard me talk about this palette 10 times over, but it really is just such a gorgeous, like, sweater weather type of vibes palette for me. I just love using this palette around this time of year. Hopefully I can get some use out of it because I haven't dipped into it yet. I mean, it's not technically fall yet, so I probably will be starting to dip into this next month. Then the next palette that, again, is a staple for me for this time of year. I absolutely love this palette. This is one of my most used palettes since I got it last March, like literally when COVID started, March 2020, this palette came out, and I've used it so much. So, of course, I have to mention the Melt Cosmetics Rust palette. This is literally like a fall dream for me. I mean, can you think of any other palette that screams fall vibes? I really can't. I just love, again, like these kind of grungier, neutral kind of tones with like these, you know, really pretty yellows, these mustardy, rusty kind of shades. That's why it's called the Rust palette. And then you have these beautiful, like, warmer toned, deepening mattes. And then you have these really dark, deepening mattes. And you can go really smoky. You can go really warm toned. You can go really, like, antique-y mustard vibes. You can do so much with this palette. I really didn't think that you could really do much with it, but the mattes that you get in here are just so beautiful with the shimmers. And I just love this palette. This is my favorite melt palette. I mean, I only have 3 melt palettes in my collection, but this is beautiful. So, and the mattes are so pigmented, like insanely pigmented. Like, you only need like one little swipe, and the pigment on Melt Cosmetics is just unreal. Like, they are just beautiful. And this palette I just love using around this time of year. So there's some of the shades for you guys. I'm not gonna go through all the shade names and everything. I will swatch a few shades for you guys. I'm not gonna swatch everything because we'll be here for 10 million years. But when I think of fall, I just automatically think of the Honey palette and this palette. They're my 2 go-to neutral palettes for this time of year, and I absolutely love this palette. Melt Cosmetics is not a formula for everyone, but I do think that this palette is one of their easiest palettes to work with. Yes, the mattes are pigmented, but if you use a light hand, they're beautiful, and they build up really, really nicely. I feel like it's a nice formula for beginners because you just swipe it on really, really quickly. It doesn't really take much blending, and it's just beautiful. I mean, with the darker shades, they are very pigmented, so I would say use a light hand as well. But I would think anyone that is trying to start out with melt, I always suggest this palette. But it's just gorgeous. I just love these rusty kind of tones for this time of year. And then the last, like, really neutral palette before I go into some other, you know, color stories. This palette is a recent love of mine. I just got this palette. This is the newest palette to my collection, but I am already in love with this formula and in love with this palette, and I think that this is a perfect palette for this time of year. Is the Beauty Bay Fiery 16 color eyeshadow palette. You guys, this palette is wonderful, and I thought that this was going to be more so like a summery toned palette for me, and that's why I ended up picking it up around, you know, the end of August, because I was like, oh, I really need this for summertime. Of course, I don't need anything, but I was like kind of thinking in my head that I could use it for like a bunch of warm tone, like, you know, reddish or orangish type of color eyes for the summertime. But honestly, this is really more so a perfect palette from the summer to fall transition of like, what do I wear? You know, like when you ever, like usually for me, I always know what eyeshadow palette that I'm gonna wear and what shimmer I'm gonna wear. That's usually how I base what I'm going to wear in general. But it's like during that summer fall type of period or spring to summer type of period are always the two transition of seasons that I never know what to wear, like clothing wise. I'm like, what do I wear? And I think that this is perfect for that. Like, I don't know if that's like a good description, but I really feel like this is a great transition palette from like summer to fall or like spring to summer. Like, but this is even a great palette from like fall to winter. But like, I really think that this is a gorgeous fall palette because you have like these warmer toned, rusty kind of vibes, like the Rust palette from Melt. But then you have these gorgeous, like reddish toned shimmers. And then you have these beautiful, like deepening shades. This shade is gorgeous. I use this shade to deepen up any look. And then the shimmers in here, you just get such an array of beautiful colors in here that I'm in love with this formula too. I'm actually wearing this palette today. I'll go through my look really, really quickly because this has been the palette that I've been testing out, you know, for the past week. So I am wearing it today. So I used the shade Honey Roast in the crease. Then I darkened up the crease more with caramel sauce. And then I used chocolate souffle on my outer corners. And then I used New Penny all over the lid. And then for the inner corners, I used All That Glitters. And that is my look for today. Honestly, even the names that I read just screams fall vibes to me. This palette is gorgeous. And it's only $10. I think that this is the best palette that I've ever tried for the price. And I haven't even used all the shades yet, but I think I've used all of the mattes and they are wonderful. They blend out beautifully and also the formula lasts a really long time. I am so impressed with this palette. Oh my god, and the mattes are so beautiful. They're so blendable and gorgeous. I'm just obsessed with this palette. I love it so much. And I think I'm going to get a ton of use out of it this fall because it's just going to be my go-to neutral palette. I can already see myself using it all the time. So there are some of the shades. This one is Hot Sauce. This one is Tango, which is such a gorgeous orangey metallic. And then the gold is Adorn. But seriously, I am so impressed with the formula. It's so buttery. The mattes blend beautifully. They're all so pigmented, but they're not like, they're so soft too. Like, I'm honestly so impressed with how soft they are and how pigmented they are. Because again, I've said this like a million times recently. Usually really pigmented mattes are more gritty feeling. These are buttery smooth. And then the shimmers are gorgeous. So I'm in love with this palette. I love it. And I highly suggest you try Beauty Bay if they have been on your list because this palette is amazing. I'm loving it so far. It's been my favorite neutral palette that I've tried for the past like couple of weeks. I'm in love with this palette. I love it so much. So that is that one. Okay. So now let's get into some ColourPop. I do have a couple of ColourPop palettes in this video. I mean, hello. But I do have one palette that I like would have to use this fall season because it's a Halloween palette. And also it was like my most used Halloween palette last year. And I'm fully intending on using it around Halloween time this year is the ColourPop Hocus Pocus Gather Around Sisters palette. But I also think that this is a gorgeous Halloween palette. I do really love these colors for fall time, and I love the packaging. It's so freaking cute. I love how the Sanderson sisters are on the outside, and then the cauldron is on the inside. And then as far as these shades go, I used this palette a ton last year during fall time, and I fully intend on doing the same thing this year. It's just a really, really pretty palette. I know a lot of people were like, I don't really see Sanderson sister vibes with this. I honestly got the Hocus Pocus vibes with this palette because honestly, when you watch the movie, they're not really wearing a whole bunch of eyeshadow. They're wearing like maybe like a little bit of eyeliner, but the only one that's really wearing more makeup is Sarah Jessica Parker. But they're not really, they went on more so what they were wearing, like, you know, for Bette Midler, she wears the green dress, she wears the red dress, and she wears the pink dress, so I thought that was perfect. And then these shades are so beautiful from like day to night looks. I really think they did a great job with this palette. And plus it's a Disney collab, and you guys know how I have a soft spot for the Disney collabs. Also, the Anna palette from Frozen 2 is a really pretty fall option, but I use the Frozen palettes obviously more during the winter time because hello, it's Frozen. This one is the one I focus on for the fall time, and the Midnight Masquerade palette is really pretty for this time of year too. But for me to give you my honest opinion on what I'm actually going to use, it's going to be this one. So they're just really beautiful shades. I love the pressed glitter in here. It's so gorgeous. And then I love like these deepening matte shades in here. Coven and I Call It a Bust are beautiful shades to deepen up any look. And then I love how they did the coinciding mattes with the colorful shimmers. I really love that. And then the Goodbye Cruel World shade is gorgeous. I love this Wen shade on the inner corners. And then you can go cool tone. I did so many looks with this palette, and I really think you can do a ton of looks with this palette. And I really didn't think you were going to be able to do so much with it, but I love this palette. So, and honestly, I can't wait to dip into it again because, to be honest, I have not used it since Halloween because this is honestly only a Halloween palette for me. I don't really use it any other time of the year. So, but this pressed glitter, their best pressed glitter they've ever done in any palette. It's freaking stunning. I don't know why they just don't make the pressed glitter formula like this because it's amazing in this palette. So, ColourPop, what are you doing? And then these shimmers don't swatch the best, but they're really pretty on the eyes. I don't actually think that these shimmers are ColourPop's greatest shimmers that they've ever done. They're a little bit more subdued and not as blinding as their shimmers usually are. But I think it kind of works with the aesthetic of this palette and the vibe of the Hocus Pocus Sanderson sisters. So I freaking love this palette. And I'm definitely going to be getting a ton of use out of it for the Halloween season. So I'm going to be using it most of October. So, and then the other two ColourPop palettes that I have to mention for the fall time is the two palettes that I have from the Into Bloom collection. These just scream fall to me. This is such a beautiful palette for the fall time. This is the ColourPop Ornate palette. You guys know that this was my #1 palette of the year so far. We will see who takes its crown this year, but this was my favorite ColourPop palette that I tried this year. I don't know if that's going to change as well at the end of the year because I've been getting a ton of ColourPop palettes this year, but honestly, this little palette is such a fall palette, and they just did such an amazing job with curating the color stories when it comes to these palettes. And I want to talk about these two together because they are completely the opposite color story-wise. But I kind of love that for fall looks. Like with the Ornate palette, I can go super warm tone, toasty vibes. And then with the Baroque palette, I can go really dark and smoky. And those are like the two looks I love doing during the fall time. So with the Ornate palette, it's just such a beautiful palette. I think that this was such a well thought out, curated palette. I love these gorgeous mattes. I mean, they're just so pretty. I love the mustardy tone in here. I love like these deeper red tones and then like these two deeper browns. They deepen up every look that you do with this palette so beautifully. And then I actually really love this like reflective black shimmer. It's gorgeous and deepens up beautifully on the eyes. And then these three shimmers, the gilded shade is so gorgeous, and then Fever is such a beautiful shade, and then Bohem is such a gorgeous like warm tone color. This palette is wonderful, and I think that this formula from them is one of their best. And the mattes are so smooth and buttery, so there are some of the shades from the Ornate palette, but I just think, even though I got it around February, so I used it more during the winter time, and I even whipped out this palette a couple of times this past summer. I think that this is a really beautiful warm tone palette for any time of year, but I really feel like that this palette thrives in the fall time, so I think that this is a gorgeous option. But what sucks is that these are actually discontinued on ColourPop's website, so I'm sorry about that, but I am honestly talking about my favorite ColourPop palettes, and I think actually all the ColourPop palettes I'm talking about aren't available anymore, so I am sorry about that, but that actually kind of sucks. I didn't realize that, but I love this palette, so, and I gotta be honest, this has been my most used ColourPop palette this year, besides my So Jaded and my Lizzie McGuire palette. Those have been my three top most used ColourPop palettes this year, so. But not in the fall yet, because I actually have not used this in the fall yet, since I didn't get it till this past winter, so. But I really do see myself using it. And then the other one, of course, is the Baroque palette, like I said. It's a really beautiful, like, deepening gray, smoky palette, and I can't wait to do looks with this for the fall time. I've only used it once, because, again, I'm using the Beauty Bay palette right now, and I'm also testing out the Tinkerbell palette, which I think is a beautiful palette as well, but honestly, it's not, like, fall vibes to me, but I'm still going to be using it this fall because it is a newer palette to me. But as far as, like, what I think are great options for fall are these two, but this is such a gorgeous palette. It's so pretty. A lot of people love this palette. It's such a unique color story for ColourPop. Honestly, like, most of their collections they have come out with this year have not really impressed me as much as the ones last year, even though I've picked up more palettes from them this year, but that's including these two. I mean, this one was sent to me from Debbie, but the Tinkerbell, the Powerpuff, the Lizzie McGuire, and the Barbie were all released this past year, but to be honest, it was only because they were collab palettes. If they weren't collab palettes, I probably wouldn't have picked up. I haven't picked up any of the regular collections from ColourPop besides this one, but this was released last year, so I don't think their regular collections have really been all that great, to be honest. They've been pretty underwhelming, so, but this is beautiful. I love it, and I can't wait to use it more. Oh, it's just so pretty. So damn pretty. Debbie wasn't really a fan, but that's okay, because she knows I'm going to use it. So those are some of the shades from the Baroque palette, and I can't wait to use it more. I'm so excited. I will have my first impressions up on it soon. I'm probably going to actually have it up before this video goes up. So yeah. Love these two palettes for fall time. And again, I am sorry they are not available anymore. Don't shoot the messenger. Where did I just put the insert, though, for these? Actually, I don't think she sent me the insert for this one. So I'm looking for something I don't even have. Okay, and then the last palette from ColourPop, which I don't know if I can go a video without mentioning this palette, but I honestly think that this is such a gorgeous fall-winter palette, because there's a lot of beautiful warm tones in here and jewel tones in here. So I have to mention the So Jaded palette from Kathleen Lights. And again, I am sorry this palette is not available anymore. That kind of sucks. But this one is just, I mean, I honestly probably won't be using this palette as much because I got so much use out of it this past year. It's still one of my most used palettes from ColourPop. I mean, like I said, the Lizzie McGuire, the Ornate, and this one, still my most used palettes from ColourPop this past year. And the reason why I used this palette so much this year was because of me and Riri's collab. If you guys haven't checked out those looks, please go check them out. I need to put a playlist together for you guys. I have not forgotten. I'm still going to do that. But honestly, like these orangey tones in here and like these reddish tones and these like, you know, warm tone vibes and then these beautiful purples and blues. Like honestly, this is still my most reached for palette if I want like a colorful look. And I love it. I'm not going to swatch any of the shades. You guys have seen me talk about it a million times, but I just wanted to mention that if you have this palette, pull it out for fall time. I think that you're really going to be impressed with the looks that you come up with for fall, because I do think that, and plus that this palette came out, in the fall when it came out. It came out like September 2019. So I love this palette. I can't not mention it. And it's one of my most used. It is my most used palette in my collection. But I do think it's a beautiful fall option. Okay, last three palettes that are in ColourPop. So this one I am definitely going to be using this fall season. Because again, this is a Halloween palette. And this one is the Waiting Room palette. The Melt Cosmetics Beetlejuice, the Waiting Room palette. I cannot wait to dip into this for this fall. I love this palette for this time of year because, I mean, first off, the packaging is just amazing. I love it so much. I know some people weren't really a fan, and I'm like, why? It's amazing. It's so unique. Like, I've never seen anyone really do this type of packaging, and I think it's gorgeous. But, I mean, just look at this palette. I mean, I don't really use this palette any other time of year besides the fall. I didn't get it until November last year, so I'm really excited to dip into it for fall grungy vibes. It's just, I love how it's curated with the reds on top and then the gray tones on the bottom. I think they just did an amazing job with this color story. The other palette was just, it wasn't really my vibe, but this one I think is beautiful. I think that they nailed the color story for this one. I don't know why they just didn't make both of them this size. I think that the Beetlejuice palette would have been a lot prettier and like more people would have been a fan of it. But these shimmers in here are so soft and buttery and they're so beautiful. And then the mattes in here are insanely pigmented and they're gorgeous. I mean, I can't really mention, I feel like Melt kind of thrives in the fall time as well. Because I feel like their color stories are so fall inspired. So there are some of the shades. But those shimmers are so smooth and buttery. And that matte, oh my god, so gorgeous. But I just love that you can do like more like deep red looks with this palette, which honestly, I don't really have any other palettes that can give me that. Besides, yeah, not really. And then you can do like these dark gray smoky vibes in this palette, kind of similar to the Baroque palette. So I cannot wait to pull out this palette this fall. I love it and I can't wait to use it again. And then the last two palettes, which I used this palette a ton this past winter or fall winter. And this is such a beautiful like fall color story to me. So this is the Pinky Rose Cosmetics Center Stage palette. Oh my god, this palette is so freaking pretty. And honestly, it just screams fall Thanksgiving vibes to me. I feel like this is such a Thanksgiving palette. It's so pretty. But look at these tones. I mean, the reds in here, the browns, the really pretty shimmers. Oh my god, this palette's so pretty. It's not like my all-time favorite palette, but it's a really good palette. The shimmers are beautiful. Honestly, if you covered up the pressed glitters, this palette would have been perfect to me. I'm not really a huge fan of their glitters, but all the other shades in here are beautiful. The mattes are gorgeous. They're very pigmented and blendable, and then the shimmers are just so smooth and pretty on the lids. But yeah, I used this palette a ton this past fall season, and I loved it. So I really cannot think of another palette that is perfect for fall. But they're just so pretty. I mean, the mattes aren't the smoothest and the butteriest when you swatch them, but they're really, really pretty on the eyes. Okay, I'm running out of room to swatch on my hands, so let me just wipe some of these off real quick. Sorry about that. And then I'm just going to swatch these. And those are some of the shades from there. I realized also that I just swatched the same shades from the Ornate palette. So they're very similar colors. So let me just swatch just one other. They're just really smooth shimmers, and they're so pretty. So there are some of the shades for you guys. Ooh, look at those shimmers. They just reflect so beautifully. So yeah, I'm probably definitely going to be using this palette more during the fall time as well. So that is the Center Stage palette from Pinky Rose. It's just so beautiful. And this was a brand that was on my list for a long time, and I'm so excited that I tried them last year. I mean, I'm so happy that I tried them last year. And then another brand that was on my list for a long time last year that I was so excited when they came out with curated eyeshadow palettes, because you guys know I don't really go for single shadows, and this brand was only really a single shadows brand, and then they came out with a couple of palettes. So this palette is the Cindy Grace palette from the Cindy Grace Summer Days palette. Yes, it is called Summer Days, but honestly, I really just get fall vibes from this palette. I'm going to try and use this palette more during the fall time. Honestly, I didn't really get much use out of it this past year. I only used it, I think, once. But honestly, I get more fall vibes from this palette than I do summer days. I get more summer nights, sunsetty vibes / fall vibes from this palette. But honestly, this is such a beautiful, like, toasty fall color story to me. And since it says s'mores and camping and cherry picking and blood orange, I really get, like, and break of day, I get more fall vibes from them. Also, the Cindy Grace formula is beautiful. I absolutely love their shimmers, and their mattes are beautiful as well, but their shimmers are where it's at. They are stunning. So this shade S'mores is my favorite shade in the palette, but their shimmers are so gorgeous. I have to use this palette more. I mean, I used it a ton when I got it last year. I used it a lot. It's a beautiful palette. So there are some of the shades for you guys, but their shimmers, look at that. Aren't those gorgeous? So pretty. So yeah, that is pretty much it, you guys. That rounds out the fall palettes. I don't think there's really any other palettes. Like, to be honest, I really am just trying to be honest to myself. These are the palettes I'm going to try and focus on. I'm going to try and use this palette a little bit more, but I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm going to try and use it at least once or twice. We will see. I have 2 other palettes coming from ColourPop soon that I'm thinking about keeping, because I'm actually thinking about decluttering a couple of other palettes. I've been really good about decluttering palettes this year, but yeah, this palette is gorgeous. And again, if you haven't tried the Cindy Grace formula, and if you're more of a palette person, I don't think this palette is available anymore either. I need to stop doing that. But actually, half of these palettes aren't available in this video anymore. I think the only ones that are still available is the Rust palette, the Honey palette, maybe this Pinky Rose palette, and the Beauty Bay palette. But the So Jaded, the Melt Waiting Room, the 2 Into Bloom palettes, the Hocus Pocus, those aren't available anymore. I don't know about the Pinky Rose one. And this one I'm not sure about either, but this is a beautiful palette. So yeah, that's it, you guys. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on my Instagram at CBW819, and check out my Poshmark at the same handle at CBW819. I gotta go because I'm getting a little bit out of breath. Woo! So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments below what your favorite fall eyeshadow palette is. Have you tried any of these palettes? Did you agree with my choices? What do you guys think? I know I always want to know what you guys think. And yeah, like I was saying, I have 2 other ColourPop palettes coming. Originally, I was going to give away one of them, but I might actually keep both of them for myself and just pick up 2 other palettes to give away later on when I announce the winner for my ColourPop giveaway. I'm also thinking about giving away 2 other ColourPop palettes. It's a secret though, because I'm not telling you guys what the palettes are yet until I announce the winner of the last giveaway, or my first giveaway. So yeah, I love you guys. Bye! And those are very fall palettes as well, so I don't know if I'm going to include them in this video. I might not have enough time to test them out to include them in this video, but I'm thinking about keeping both of them. So yeah, bye!